Hi guys, welcome. Today we're going to be talking to Michelle Hurn. She is a registered dietitian and she wrote a new book called The Dietitian's Dilemma, and we're so happy she was here before. She did a big interview all about her story and all that, so we'll do a little bit of that today, but not too much, because if you want to hear her whole long story, then go back to the first video we did. And it dives into all that, and so she'll tell us a little abbreviated version today, and then
Sure.
we'll answer questions about the book and have a lot of fun. So stay with us all the way till the end. Hi, Michelle. Welcome.
Hey, Caitlin, it's so good to be back. It's almost been a full year since we did this, so it's really exciting.
Wow, I can't believe it's been that long. Like, so much has changed, and I heard that
Indeed.
you at that time you were working in a clinical setting with patients, and I think you've quit doing that. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so when we talked back, it was like February of 2020. I'm a registered dietitian and I was working in acute care. And so, seeing lots of patients, and just at that time, we kind of talked about some of the disconnects I was having. You're having to prescribe all these high carbohydrate guidelines, even for people who are diabetic or kidney failure or obese. And that was hard. That was really a struggle. And kind of fast forward into the COVID pandemic. I actually ended up losing all of my guaranteed hours, so they put me into the call center where I was actually taking orders for patients would call in and order food, and I wasn't allowed to be a dietitian. I just had to input orders. So I'd have diabetics call in and be ordering, I want chocolate cake and I want this. And so for 8 hours a day, I'm literally just taking orders on a phone, and also, a phone. So you're getting yelled at. And I was just like, I don't want to do this. I can't do this.
Right.
And at that point, I'd already started writing my book. I had seen that profound shift in my health, and I can real quickly touch on that. And so I said, I've got to get out. There was just, the disconnect became too big. As a health professional, our first premise is we do no harm. And I felt like by continuing in this system and continuing to not be able to advocate a low carbohydrate diet, I was actually contributing to the harm. So yeah, I left the system, got a different job, and was able to put just so much more time into writing the book, into training for my ultra marathon.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you guys didn't know, she does ultra marathons, which is crazy. But that is, a special kind of person that likes to do that. So
I like to use the word special. Thank you.
unique.
Thank you.
I mean, it's definitely not my cup of tea, but if you can do it and it makes you happy, then I'm all for it. If you're able to maintain your health and everything. So tell us a little bit about your story, like how you were doing kind of a high carb athlete and switching over to the
Sure.
increase more meat and all that.
Yeah. So, throughout my history, my adulthood, early adolescence into adulthood, I was eating a very high carbohydrate diet. I was following the standard American guidelines. I became a dietitian in 2009, and it's just indoctrinated. You need these carbohydrates. You need, even a diet, diabetic, everybody needs them. And I felt, I'm very active. Certainly I need them. And, throughout most of my life, I've struggled with pretty severe anxiety. But, I ran long distances. I've done 12 marathons, qualified for Boston 12 times. And my ultimate goal with endurance running was to qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon. So to do that, you need to run under 2 hours and 45 minutes. So for reference, that's a 6:17 mile for 26 miles. And I ran at 2:54. And so I was getting close. And so about a year before we first started chatting, I really started ramping up my training. And it just seemed like I wasn't recovering. My body was hurting. I was achy. And to kind of fast forward, I talked to 2 different sports dietitians and said, look, at that point I was eating about 300 to 350 grams of carbs a day. And both the dietitians I talked to told me, you need to eat more carbohydrates and more often. So you need to be eating 400, 450. You're eating 6 times a day. You need to eat 8 times a day. And as you can imagine, that didn't go well. Like, my running went from like, I'm struggling to recover and I don't feel good, to severe anxiety. I was waking up in the middle of the night with muscle spasms and pain. I couldn't get through the day without just like feeling shaky and dizzy. And so, you know, I ended up at like 3 in the morning, waking up in the middle of the night and having such severe pain that I went and got like 30 pounds of ice and put it in the bathtub. You know, I'm sitting in an ice bath at like 3 in the morning. And that's when, you know, my wife came in and we both were like, we have to do something differently. So at that point I decided I was not going to run anymore. But, you know, and you can obviously go back and see our full story, but kind of fast forward is because I thought I wasn't going to run anymore. I decided to follow a ketogenic diet, ended up going carnivore for about, probably about 45 days total of pure carnivore. And within 3 weeks, muscle pain was gone. Body felt good. My wife said, this is the best I've seen your anxiety in 11 years I've known you. And then I just started dreaming again. Like, what can I run? And so I signed up, ended up signing up for a 50-mile race. It was supposed to happen in May, got canceled. So I signed up for a race in October, got canceled.
Yeah.
But Zach Bitter, he's a fantastic human. He's my coach. We finally got to toe the line, November 7th. I ran a 6-hour race. So the goal is just who can run the most laps in 6 hours. And there ended up being 22-mile-an-hour winds. So that was eventful.
Oh
But
my-
I ran 44.63 miles, 8:04 pace. So first female overall. I ran the second longest distance covered in 6-hour race in 2020. So that was pretty cool. So I went from not being able to run at all to being able to run a lot. And yeah, it just, everything in my life changed. You know, as I wrote the book, I went through a period where I was just really angry. I was angry at our healthcare system. I was like, why are we feeding diabetics, you know, all these carbohydrates and dosing them with insulin when we have several clinical trials that we can reverse diabetes, Caitlin, in as little as 8 days. 8 days. I have people come into when I was a dietitian in the hospital, 20 years of diabetes, you know, both legs amputated, wounds down to the bone. You know, someone asked me, what's the craziest thing you've seen in the hospital? And when I worked in Boulder, Colorado, we actually utilized maggot therapy. You can Google it. If you have a strong stomach, you actually put, anyway, but we do crazy things when in general, when we change how we eat, when we go back to that low carbohydrate, high fat, high protein diet, the human body can heal, has such a tremendous capacity to heal in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
And so that's what the dietitian's dilemma is. And honestly, it's not just dietitians, it's doctors. We get put in this position where we start to see like these nutrition guidelines don't work. They're driven by corporate sponsorships. They're driven by, you know, insulin companies. They're not driven for health, right? And what do you do? So that was kind of the premise behind the book. And man, it's been a joy. It's been a crazy ride. Writing is wonderful. Editing is a nightmare. I feel so grateful that I've got over 20 testimonies from so many people in the ketogenic and carnivore community. I'm thrilled that Dr. Ben Bickman, Dr. Eric Westman wrote cover reviews. Yeah, so it's been amazing.
That's great. So what is kind of, I mean, there's been several carnivore books, you know, written by Sean Baker and Maria Emmerich and some other people, and so what is your kind of unique take on, is it about carnivore or is it about your journey, or, you know, what is kind of your lane there?
Yeah, great question. And there are so many great books, you know, and I feel fortunate that I got to read and study a lot of those books. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to take what I saw. Like it starts with my story. Like my story, you know, someone who was, you know, very young, had a serious eating disorder. You know, my mom was bipolar. So like growing up in that type of environment to, you know, going through school, becoming an athlete, and then like, you know, what is it like to be a dietitian in a hospital setting? And then it goes into 5 disease states that I thought I could speak really well on, things that I saw in the hospital consistently. And I wanted to incorporate lots of stories because I think we kind of learn through stories. And I think some books, when you're just throwing data at people, it's just like, it's either kind of over your head or it's boring. I wanted anybody who read it to really be able to kind of understand, right? Like, oh, that really makes sense. That's cool. And it's also not just a carnivore book per se or ketogenic. it's really advocating like a science-based low carbohydrate diet. Because I think what I want to be really careful. I don't want to like, if you don't eat exactly this way, it's wrong, or exactly this way. I think we have to get back to that foundation of meat and fat. And then there's so much room for nuance depending on your individual tolerance. So I walk people through diabetes. Like, what does the research say? I cite over 180 clinical trials too. And then I have stories. And then we talk about, I think what's really different with my book is I go really in depth with mental illness and eating disorders. You know, suggesting that someone follow a low carbohydrate diet for eating disorders is met with a lot of resistance. You know, there's this dogma, all foods need to fit. What are you talking about? But we have very good,
restrictive. Right?
Yeah, we have really good research and data that, you know, that when you eat a lot of those carbohydrates and processed foods, it can actually shift the neurochemistry in your brain, you know, and I think we need to start having those conversations because most people, you know, I had a serious eating disorder. Most people who have eating disorders genuinely want to recover. And the relapse rate is through the roof. You know, anorexia has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. And so I think we need to start asking, like, is there something we can do? Is there a way we can set up our brains and bodies to make sure that we're healing? You know, I talk about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to cope with stress. Unfortunately, you know, we're eating in a way now, most of America eats so many carbohydrates that actually shuts down your brain's ability to cope with stress. And also, if you can't cope with stress, you can't rewire your brain and learn new behaviors. So let's say somebody who has binge eating disorder, bulimia, you're doing the therapy, you're trying to learn and you're going through all this stuff. But if you're eating the standard American diet, your brain may not actually be able to rewire. And so when you have that stress, you can't act on those coping mechanisms. I cite a couple really interesting studies in the book. So mental disorders and eating disorders. Mental disorders also, you know, bipolar, schizophrenia, major depression and anxiety. One thing that concerns me, you know, I don't have children, but the suicide rates, depression rates, anxiety rates for our young people are increasing exponentially. So I think we really need to take a look, like, what are we feeding our children, you know? And I cite Dr. Chris Palmer. I actually got an email back from him. He's kind of one of my, you know, Dr. Hero people. So that was pretty cool. And then sarcopenia. You know, I don't think we talk a lot about sarcopenia. And what that is it's just muscle wasting. You know, working in the clinical setting, I had people as young as their early 40s that were just so overly fat, but under muscled that they couldn't literally walk to the bathroom. You know, but we see that a lot statistically in our country and in the US. By the time people are 85, 50% have sarcopenia, meaning they're just muscle wasted. So we talk about, like, what can we do? Are our protein recommendations, is it okay for an old elderly person to be eating a plant-based diet? Is that going to prevent or reverse sarcopenia? Spoiler alert, it's not. But we go into that and we go into, like, how can we reverse this? You know, because I think too, a lot of people think, well, I'm 60 and I'm old and fat, whatever. There's nothing I can do about it. And it's just amazing how quickly the body can heal and how, you know, but you really do. You have to remove certain foods and you have to put in certain foods.
That makes me wonder, like, because you've been inside the system, I mean, what is stopping the truth from coming out? I mean, why is it so...
I mean, money. There's so much money. And I have an entire chapter too on where the nutrition guidelines came from. And I think most people, like, kind of know the story, like, oh, it's corporate based, but it's bizarre. Like, I mean, it's everything from, you know, it starts with religion and visions from God to the Seventh-day Adventist Church to the creation of the Dietetic Society for what was going on in World War II and Vietnam, and then, you know, the high fructose corn syrup and Ansel Keys. So when you tie it all together, and you kind of see, like, oh, this is how we got here. I think it really helps people. It'll help people understand, like, yeah, this is why these are never going to be good for health. You know, and
margarine was made for the war, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, and in processed foods too. I mean, originally we were growing so much subsidies. It was good. It was like, hey, we got to feed our allies. But then you had all this leftover wheat and corn I mean, it's a long, pretty crazy story, but you know, unfortunately, what's happening now is we have in healthcare, you know, to have a customer, to make money, I can't heal you. If I heal you, you're gone. You don't need my services. If I kill you, you're gone. So I kind of have to keep you perpetually sick. And we're doing a great job of that. Giving a diabetic carbohydrates and dosing them with insulin, they'll never get off insulin. They're going to continue to have infections and problems. So they're going to need surgeries. And so, you know, in 2019, the top 3 pharmaceutical companies earned between 10 and $15 billion. And so they love processed foods and processed foods are earning a lot of money, you know. And then we have, you know, dietitians who, you know, the Academy of Nutrition, governing board of all dietitians, is sponsored by PepsiCo and Frito-Lay and General Mills. So they fund money into the dietitians. We teach dietitians all this stuff. Dietitians, you know, say have this in moderation, and the brain can't moderate carbohydrates, and nobody actually knows what moderation means. So people eat lots of, you know, low fat stuff and they feel terrible and get sick. And then we blame them for being fat and lazy and not listening to us. It's just this really gnarly cycle. And so what is it going to take to shift? And we just saw the new nutrition guidelines came out. So I don't think it's going to come from above, because like I said, there's just so much money. Like there's just too much money. And it's sad. I wish if it was all altruistic and everybody had a, like, you know, a good heart, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But it's going to take, you know, you and me and grassroots and people like, you know, Dr. Nevada Gray and Dr. Hampton and Dr. Siwis and all these people continuing to advocate, Dr. Westman, Dr. Palmer, and people, sometimes it takes getting really sick to kind of like see the forest through the trees, right? And say, okay, this is really not working. But, you know, it's hopefully that when people read my book, because, you know, I hope that it speaks to whatever's going on with you. Because I don't know anyone who doesn't at least know somebody that has diabetes, or know someone that has an eating disorder, or know somebody that's struggling with anxiety or depression. I also have a chapter on heart disease. I think that's one of the biggest roadblocks to a ketogenic or a carnivore diet, is just, oh, meat will cause your heart to explode. Fat is bad. There's so much fear mongering. So I think, you know, I really break it down. Like, does higher LDL cholesterol actually cause heart disease? You know, so we answer a lot of those questions. Yeah, spoiler alert, no, it really doesn't. So, and then plants versus animals. I have a whole that chapter has the most clinical trials of all the chapters, which is kind of funny. Just because there's this movement, like we need to eat all this plant-based foods, right? We need to eat these soy burgers and, you know, 20 bananas. I made a post. People, I think it's gotten the most likes, that I wouldn't feed that stuff to my chickens. Like, I'm not feeding, you know, vital wheat gluten. And one of my chickens like paint off the side of the house. Like, I have to keep her away. It's non-toxic. Y'all don't email me. But what has happened is now we have people encouraging, you know, professionals saying, eat this plant-based burger. I get emails at least once a week for free continuing education for dietitians on how to prescribe plant-based diets. And there, in my professional opinion, the clinical trial cited in the book, and my, you know, personal experience, a plant-based diet is one of the worst things you can do for your health. Absolutely. And probably what's really scary about it is sometimes short-term, you may feel better. If you're eating really terrible and you start eating a lot of plants, you might feel better short-term, but long-term, you know, so we talk about things like bioavailability. You know, we know that the nutrients in plants are not just, your body can't utilize and absorb them well. And maybe that would be okay. Like, oh, well, you just don't get as much iron. But there's so many anti-nutrients, you know, in plants, that not only are you not absorbing the nutrition in plants, they're actually binding to things like calcium and iron and pulling it out of your body. And for many people, they cause pretty bad autoimmune symptoms. Joint pain, headaches, bloating, gas, diarrhea, brain fog.
And we're told those things are all normal. I mean, and
yeah.
What I see, I'm in all these mom groups and breastfeeding groups, and women write me all the time that they can't have babies and stuff. And it's like, because of all these plant-based diets and these low protein diets, and you know, and they're always like, I can't make milk. And it's like, your body's not, it's supposed to just work. It's supposed to just work naturally, not, you shouldn't have to have all of these special, you know, they talk about teas and all this stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you just need to eat meat and eggs, and you will
Yeah.
probably start being able to get pregnant and start being able to breastfeed and all these things that you are having trouble with, you know. And it's like, I feel like it's makes me crazy when I see them all and talking in these groups, you know, about.
Yeah, I encourage people to think of the human body like a supercomputer. It needs the correct inputs to get the correct output. Like what happens in our computers, like if you type in the wrong password, it's like error, error, and then it might freeze and shut down, right? Every species has a species specific diet. It's like we've kind of forgotten that, you know. And what happens, like, you know, I have a dog. We have about like a zoo here. But if I feed her just kale and carrots, she will get very sick and she will die. I mean, I could be thrown in jail for animal abuse. Humans have a species specific diet. We evolved on meat and fat. Can you survive on? Yes, you can survive on all kinds of things. There's even clinical trials that someone lost weight eating just Twinkies, you know? But over time, your body will break down. Your brain will not function, you know? And so it's almost like we've tried to outsmart nature, creating these fake plants and meats and teas, you know, and then we've demonized animal foods. And what I've seen now, especially over the last year, I've had the pleasure, I have the privilege to interview so many people that literally within months of shifting, sometimes weeks of shifting from a plant-based diet or a processed diet back to meat, eggs, fat, their health completely shifted. You know, your brain needs that nutrition. So it's really interesting to me how much fear mongering and how there's just so much bad information out there, you know. And I'm sure you still, I've gotten lots of, you know, hate emails and tweets and you're a fraud, you're all this stuff. It's just like, it's just really, really unfortunate that we, as a society, you know, there's a lot of people that demonize eating meat, eggs, and fat.
They just don't, yeah, they just don't understand. And I mean, I think until you really get sick, and I mean, I have to remind my parents all the time, it's like, don't read all that stuff, because every single day on TV, everywhere, we're just bombarded with plant-based. And I'm like, just remember that there's an agenda, you know, you just have to block it out. It's not real. I think everybody wants you to eat these. I mean, it's processed food, especially all the Beyond Meat and all that kind of stuff. It's really processed food, just greenwashed into being healthy, and it's not. So
Yeah, I mean, once again, unfortunately, it really goes back to there's a lot of money, you know, and I think you have to always step back and say, like, who is profiting off of this, you know? And it's sad because a lot of marketing and advertising, like, you don't necessarily have to, it doesn't have to be truthful. You know, a lot of plant-based products are advertised as like superfoods, clean, best food out there. I mean, there's no science behind that. So I think just getting back to like, what is real food? What is whole foods, you know? So yeah, so that's kind of what the book talks about. We do, you know, Diana Rogers wrote such a beautiful book, The Sacred Cow, on animal agriculture and how actually good that is for the planet. So I really just briefly touch on that. I don't have a whole lot in there about that. But I do have like a getting started chapter, because I think just, you know, talking about, you know, for me, I think a lot of people can really benefit from going full carnivore, at least for a short period of time, for it to heal your gut or to reset, and then kind of moving to more of like a keto carnivore. And then depending what your goals are, you know, if you're, for me as someone who runs 80 miles a week, like I often will have some more carbohydrates. So kind of, I call it my animal-based build out, to where you're, you know, you have that foundation, and then do you need to gain weight for sports or for health? So, and then I have a chapter on like what I do to run. It was funny. I've had a lot of people reach out and ask like, oh my gosh, what do you eat? You know? So it's not super exciting. It's a lot of beef, but I am working with a low carbohydrate sports nutrition company called S Fuels. So that's been fantastic. And yeah, so I hope people, you know, the whole goal of the book was just to give people hope, to give them information, and to tell stories, to share the stories from the community. and, you know, get people excited to make some changes.
Well, I noticed you talked about body dysmorphia and losing, you know, even when you lose weight or you, and you know, in conjunction with the eating disorder, it's like you never really see yourself as you are. And I think in our culture, we're growing up as women and everything, we're taught, you know, that we're never good enough. And so even if we get an ideal body, then we're still picking it apart and all that. Tell us a little bit about your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, one of the biggest goals and one of the things that happened, it was really interesting. Hasn't happened to me, I don't know, I think ever really since I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was 12. And I just thought, I'm going to struggle with this, or, you know, I was always told, even if you're weight restored, you're going to struggle with these racing thoughts. You're never going to like your body. And I was just kind of okay with that. Right. But once I started eating the carnivore diet, actually, you know, initially put on a little bit of weight, I remember thinking like, you know, I'm okay with this because I like how I feel, you know? And so the whole one, that's one of the, also we talk about in eating disorder chapter, starting to like shift how you're thinking from, you know, trying to look a certain way and weigh a certain weight versus like, what can my body do? You know, how do I feel? Do I have energy? Do I have, you know, am I able to think clearly? So trying to really shift kind of that thought process, because you're right, you know, it doesn't matter. Even when I was way underweight, you know, I still saw myself as overweight, and I still thought that I'm not gonna, you know, you're not good enough, whatever. And so I do think when you start to kind of fuel your body in a way that aligns with human physiology, you know, the mostly meat and fat, you're able to actually start having like clear thoughts, right? You're able to start, you know, your neurotransmitters are good, your hormones are more stable. But yeah, for me, making peace with food and just having a clear mind really helped me start to kind of like accept and embrace who I am. And it also, once again, you know, I was able to start dreaming about running long distances and able to compete. So,
You started to think about, you know, what you want to do with your life, and that you weren't happy with what you were doing, and you got a better, I mean, because you know, I think we're all told just to make money and get your name, letters behind your name, and you'll be happy. And it's like, well, that doesn't always work, right?
No, and you know, it's truly like I always thought, you know, I have a very, I guess, competitive family. I have three older sisters. I'm the youngest of four. My two oldest sisters are MDs, family practice doctor, surgeon. My next oldest sister is a fluent Japanese speaking veterinarian. So, you know, I always thought having that RD and just being able to get out there, and I was miserable. I hated being in the hospital, and I hated prescribing things that you know, seeing people not get better and just being in this terrible cycle. And when I went, you know, when I left the hospital and I was focusing on writing, and I actually took a job with a company called Scratch Meats, and it's just a local company in Portland. We're breaking down like animals from local farms, and we're making sausage. So, I mean, totally different than anything I've ever done. And also it was very humbling. It was like, check your ego. Because, you know, I thought like, oh, I have to do this hospital work and make this amount of money. And it was a, you know, pretty big pay reduction, but I've never been happier. You know, it's like I felt everyone that I worked with is, you know, had the mission. We're bringing nutrition to our community, and we're doing a good thing with these local farmers. And it's interesting. You know, I'd always encourage anybody, just especially young people, just to really be open to chasing like what truly, you know, you feel good about and makes you happy. And ultimately, you know, obviously we have to have enough money to pay our rent and do other things. But that will come when you're just chasing that, like, I got to get my master's, or I got to get whatever, you know. Like I said, I've never been less happy than when I was in a clinical setting making a lot of money. And then now that I'm, you know, not, I'm the happiest I've ever been. And well, one other thing too, I do think, you know, I write about this in the book. There was you know, having struggled with an eating disorder for so many years, and, you know, following kind of the traditional diet, I imagine a lot of people that struggle with eating disorders or body dysmorphia. Like, I've always kind of made an effort not to like look in the mirror unless I'm like fully clothed, but I was going for a run. This is several months ago, and I'm a sports bra and shorts, and I'm putting my hair on, and I like caught my reflection in the mirror. And it was a really odd moment. Like, you know, I can't, you know, I certainly can't say that I love my body all the time. But it was just this almost like moment of acceptance. Like, oh, okay. Like, so much of my life has been over this last year is like, what can I do? Right. Like, I'm focusing on my running and my writing and my advocacy, that I've actually started to like kind of make peace with who I am. Like, I like myself, you know, I like where I'm going. And that's, I mean, the first 30 some years of my life wasn't really true, you know, constant self-doubt and constant anxiety. So yeah, I do think we can heal, and, you know, heal to a pretty strong degree when we really start to shift. I mean, it definitely starts with shifting, I think, what you put in your body, but you also, you know, there's a lot of work too. It's not like you shift how you're eating and you're healed from an eating disorder. I mean, you shift how you're eating, and I think it allows you to be able to work through trauma and kind of process some of your stuff as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, healing your gut can make a huge change in your brain, and then it just kind of, it's a cascade effect. So where do you see yourself going next, or what are you going to do next?
It's you know, it's kind of funny. Sometimes I feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants, but as we're recording this, you know, the book is almost out. So hopefully, I don't know, by the time you post this, it will be out. So that's pretty exciting. I have my next race. I have a race scheduled for June 19th. It's a 12-hour race. So I'll be running for 12 hours. That sounds crazy saying that out loud. So my goal is to win the race and to break the course record. So y'all can follow me on Instagram if you're excited about that. And then working at Scratch Meats it's mostly seasonal. So I'll be picking back up with them in March. And yeah, I'm gonna hopefully do some more work with S-Fuels, the sports nutrition company, do some webinars, maybe do some traveling and use some speaking stuff. So we'll see. I'm open. I'm grateful. I'm hopeful for, you know, more opportunities. But right now I'm just, you know, finishing the book and running like a crazy person.
So do you talk to people over the phone if they need help with their diet, or?
Not right now. You know, I've had people reach out to me and ask, and I mean, I guess I should have said that as well. Like, I do think, like, if you read it, sometimes you read a book and you're like, okay, what do I do now? So I do have like lots of people who do coaching, health coaches, you know, and dietitians and nutrition therapists. And so I often will refer them to those people. But yeah, you know, maybe at some point I would, but not right now. It would have to be the right situation. I actually had an opportunity to go back to the hospital setting, and I was just like, I just can't do it. You know, if I was able to do like some type of low carb counseling, then I potentially would. But
that's
yeah.
what I mean, like on the phone or something.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. Who knows?
What about, so where can people find your book, and tell them your Instagram and all that stuff?
Okay, so the book will be up, fingers crossed, it'll be January 31st. It is finishing being formatted right now. It's going to be on Amazon. So, but you can go to my website, you guys, the dietitiansdilemma.net. And then the minute it's up on Amazon, I'll have a link there. Right now, it just is coming soon. And then my Instagram, all one word, run, eat, meet, repeat. And once again, the minute the book is up on Amazon, I can promise you guys I'll have a link on my Instagram, but there'll be updates as well. So, and it's a print book. And the print book is in black and white, and the ebook is in color. I really wanted to do the print book in color. It was just, it's going to be too much I was going to have to charge too much to, you know, but it's, I'm so grateful. You know, I had Dr. Nevada Gray wrote the foreword, health coach Kate did the graphics. So it's pretty cool. It turned out really well.
And I'll put a link down below in the description box. So you guys check out Michelle Hurn and follow her on Instagram at Run, Eat, Meet, Repeat. And you said dietitiansdilemma.net. And it's been great to hear a little bit about your book and your story. It was really, everybody reach out to her on Instagram. She's a very sweet person. We've become friends over these last year. So congratulations on your book. And I'm just so happy that you found, you know, more of a direction that is in line with your heart. So, all right, we'll keep in touch. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.